good camp. Team's excited about the opener. Teams are always excited about the opener regardless, really, of who you play. The hay is far from being in the barn as we have 5 practices this week, but it feels like game week. It feels like game time, and I'm excited to get it going, and I know our players are too. And we got a bunch of guys that I think are extremely confident, committed, done a great job of preparing themselves up to this point, and we're looking forward to it. Let it rip.
Coach, can you talk about having to prepare for a staff that wasn't in place there last year? I know they had the same problem with your staff, but trying to get ready for a staff and having to evaluate a couple of different schools from the coaches and the players.
Sure. Well, I think this is going on with both staffs, 2 new head coaches. Actually, 3 of our first 4 opponents are new head coaches. So in our case, we've watched a lot of Troy tape from 2017 and 18. Been watching Maryland special teams tape. That's where the special teams coordinator comes from. I'm sure they're watching a lot of Elon and Maine and Charlotte and Youngstown, and maybe some Mercer special team stuff. So they have a pretty good idea of what I'd like to see our football team's identity be. I have a pretty good idea of what Neil would like to see his football team's identity be. And regardless of the plays that are run, it's going to come down to who blocks, tackles, runs, catches, makes the plays at the critical time. Who can get their guys doing their job consistently, play in, play out. It's a fundamental game.
Since they named Austin Kendall their starting quarterback, how have you prepped for him? What have you guys looked at? I know there's not much. How have you guys prepped for Austin Kendall?
Well, he's maybe a little bit more like some of the guys they've played at Troy. We didn't begin West Virginia prep until Thursday. We've seen him on tape quite a bit in terms of their spring game and maybe some high school stuff. He didn't play a whole lot at Oklahoma. So, he's a guy, obviously, that I would describe as maybe more of a pocket passer, but he still, has good mobility. And, they've added some receivers to the team via the transfer portal and the NCAA free agency wire, which now exists, that used to not exist, where a guy can go from one Division I school to another if he has a headache. So they've added some new faces there. But Neil's going to try to run the ball. He's going to spread you horizontally, vertically, throw it down the field. And
Coach, on the topic of their run game, they've got experienced running backs. I think their 4 leading rushers are back from last year. What do you see in those backs? Are they very similar or are they different?
Well, I think all those backs, first of all, they're experienced guys. They've been very productive, do a good job of catching the ball out of the backfield too. They all have good speed, can make you miss. So we're going to have to do a good job of tackling, fitting the gaps. They've got some offensive linemen returning that played last year. There's a couple new guys in there too. Got a new center. So when you talk about stopping the run game, you got to win the one-on-one battles up front, and you got to make sure you're fitting the gaps correctly.
Coach, you talk about consistency. How are you going to get that now that it's game week and you guys are, week 0 games have passed by? How do you build that consistency ahead of, your first game against West Virginia?
Well, hopefully we've done a good job of preparing them in the spring and fall camp. And I've seen very significant progress in our practices, sort of playing that one play at a time thing, never too high, never too low. Every play's got a life and a history of its own, and then you're on to the next play. And I've been pleased with the progress we've made from about the middle of fall camp on. And, you got a lot of time, really, as a staff, when you go back to middle of last week, and this week to, watch the opponent on tape. My biggest concern is that we don't put too much in on both sides of the ball so we can free our guys up and let them play. You always go back and critique the openers you've been a part of in the past. What's been good, what hasn't worked out, and it's usually some new idea that looked great on tape that you don't have enough reps on. So, I want to, in all 3 phases, do the things we've done the most reps on, because our guys are going to be confident and they're going to compete, and give them a chance to be successful.
There's been a lot of talk about, obviously, Jimmy Moreland moving on to the Redskins and playing so well, leaving an opening in the defensive backfield. Who have you seen play consistently well at that other spot, maybe opposite Rashad Robinson?
Yeah, well, Rashad's had a really good August camp. He's picked up where he left off in the spring, and on the other side, I've been really impressed with Wesley McCormick. I think he's had a very strong camp in terms of his coverage and his ball in the air skills. And so I feel really good about our corners right now. And, in the spring, that was maybe a position that was up for grabs, so to speak. Now, every week, you always evaluate how you're doing, and there's a standard of performance that is demanded and required. But I have a lot of confidence in our corners.
Coach, for you, getting set to play West Virginia with your history of being a student athlete there, with your dad coaching there, just kind of what are your personal feelings about going back to play a school that you actually have some history with?
Yeah, right. When I was announced as the head coach and looked at the schedule and saw the opener, that definitely kind of caught my eye. I haven't been back in a long time. I think the last time was '99 when I was at the University of Pittsburgh with Walt Harris. So obviously have a lot of great memories. Moved there as a family in 1970. I was in third grade, so third grade through college at West Virginia University. Had a lot of great friends, and but come Saturday when we walk in that stadium, it really doesn't matter what stadium you walk into. You've got a job to do, and the field size doesn't change, and so it's all business.
Coach, you've talked about Solomon Van Horst and Austin Douglas this offseason. Without giving away too much or giving away your game plan, how are you going to utilize them this Saturday against West Virginia so they can get real game time minutes?
Well, that's a good question. That's a question I'm asking Shane Montgomery and Matt Merritt a lot, too. How are we going to play all four of these running backs? Because, Solomon Van Horst had an excellent spring, and he's had an excellent camp. He's a very dependable guy. Austin Douglas came in as a freshman. Really picked things up very quickly. He's very mature, has excellent running skills. Obviously, Percy returns and Jawan returns. So we really haven't made any decisions yet in terms of who's going to be out there first and, how that rotation will work. And I've got an idea in my mind how I think it's going to work. But like you said, we won't give out any secrets right now.
Coach, what about the tight ends? You got some guys with some experience there. Looks like Dylan Stapleton, from what I could tell, had a pretty solid camp. What have you seen out of that position and utilizing them to make your offense stronger?
Well, we have pretty good depth at tight end. We have 4 guys that have played there. I think Dylan Stapleton has been as consistent as any player on our team in the spring and in fall camp. Drew Painter's done a nice job at tight end also, is another, big body type of guy. And, we've got Clayton Cheatham and Nick Carlton there too. So, I think it's a position of strength, and it gives us some flexibility in terms of the things that we can do offensively.
The competition at left tackle, those two guys, Raymond Gillespie and Zaire, how has that competition gone, and how have you seen those two guys make each other better because of it?
Yeah. Well, I think we got 9 guys on the offensive line, that we could play. And, I feel really good about our offensive line. We're still maybe trying to figure out who the starting 5 will be. I think I know right now. We've got 6 guys really that are starters. When you throw Truvell Wilson into that mix and Zaire Bethea, who missed the first week of training camp but's come back and been pretty dominant since he's returned. I think it's a position of strength, and I think we have some flexibility in there.
One of your deeper rooms is your wide receiver room. It's, although somewhat unproven, the depth of the unproven wide receivers. How do you see those guys mature and take steps moving forward to try to earn some playing time?
Well, Kendall Dean had a big year last year as a redshirt freshman. He's picked up where he's left off. Jake Brown, also, who caught 38 balls. On the other side, we've got Brandon Polk, a transfer from Penn State. We've got Daniel Adu, who's been in the program for 3 years, who's a big, long guy that runs well and has had a good spring and a good fall camp. Reggie Brown continues to, flash. And also in the slot, Devin Ravenel, has thrived. We moved him from outside to inside and has made plays really every day. So We are going in there minus one starter that's played, significant football here, had 62 catches last season, but, I have 100% confidence in the guys that we're going to throw out there that they can get the job done.
Coach, how do you prepare this team for playing in the atmosphere that's going to be at Morgantown? With 60,000 fans, it's always known as a rowdy atmosphere at West Virginia.
Right.
How do you prep for that?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's all about just maintaining your poise and your focus, okay, not being affected by the external circumstances. But, we'll probably get some noise involved with practice here later in the week. We've made maybe an adjustment or two to handle the noise better. I know a lot of people do a lot of different things in the noise. I mean, when we were at Alabama, we were in the noise every week, we didn't change our cadence. Now, I'm not saying that we won't do that here. So I just think that it's more about getting locked in on what's going on between the white lines and not the things that are going on outside the white lines.
Coach, sort of springboarding off that question, a lot of these guys played at NC State last year, which is a big stage, and it was noisy. How are you counting on your leadership to get this team ready for week one, especially for some of your younger guys you're going to be leaning on?
Right. Well, I think that is probably one of our team's strengths is our experience, our game experience. We have a lot of guys that have played, and we have a lot of guys that have played a lot. So, that's why, I'm confident that we're going to go in there very confident and compete. And, we'll have a few guys maybe that haven't played quite as much, but I can tell you, like those guys like Austin Douglas, we can throw him into LSU and I'd be fine in that environment, with him, because he's just that kind of guy. So, I think we've got good leadership on our football team. I think, they felt really good about what went on in spring ball and fall camp. And I know they've been itching to get back on the field for a long time. And, it's the opener. You're always excited. We're ready to play. Now, in saying that also, every game is one game. None of these games count as 1.5 or 1.25. It's a 12-game season. And, whenever this game ends, there's going to be another game. And there's going to be 12 regular season games and hopefully a lot of playoff games. All right? And they're all weighted the same. But the game you're getting ready to play that week is the most important game. And when we come out of that tunnel, we're going to be believing, ready to go.
As far as West Virginia's defense goes, what are things that stand out to you personnel-wise? I know you don't know what their scheme's totally going to look like because they've moved on from the stack, but defensively, personnel-wise, what stands out?
Well, it's a new defense that, lists itself on the depth chart as a 3-down. A lot of times on tape only, they will look like a 4-down, and very multiple in their movement, and their looks in the secondary. I think they probably feel pretty good about their defensive line, watching the spring game, listening to the coaches talk. They've got some experienced players returning. They got some new guys. They did lose a lot of safeties after spring ball and have had to move to corner to safety. They have some experienced corners returning. So, I'm sure they're going to be a challenge.
Coach, as you sit here and prepare, what's maybe one thing about either your team or about this game, about this matchup that kind of is still keeping you up at night? What's something that maybe you're still not sure about or something that's kind of still you're losing sleep over, I guess?
I'm sleeping better right now than I ever have because I have total confidence in our guys and I know they're ready to play.